So before you dive into today's episode, I just want to say that this topic could be triggering. Please keep that in mind as you're listening. And if for any reason, right, you need to take a break, please give yourself that. If you need to turn off the episode, go ahead. I know these topics can feel pretty heavy, and today's like that for us talking today. All right. Hello. Welcome to Foreignsics, the What is Life podcast, where we make the uncomfortable comfortable. I'm your host, Zafreen. Thanks for being here today. As always, these thoughts and opinions are completely our own. And for those listening, you're here to hopefully hear about life and maybe just want a space to feel seen and heard. And if not, no worries too. Just appreciate you being here. Today's episode is a big one. Today we're talking about obedience and respect not meaning the same thing. And we're joined here today by my lovely friend, Namrata. So before we dive into today, I'll just tee it off to her to just give a little bit of introduction of who she is.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Namrata, and I'm so thrilled to be here today. Just some information about me. I am a first-generation Indian American. I immigrated from India with my parents when I was only 6 months old. So it's kind of been a whirlwind of experiences here. But as far as what I do, I am a program specialist at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which is where I met the lovely Zafreen. And on my free time, I am also a event planner. So we just wrapped up a very busy wedding season, and it's just been really nice to catch up with family, and thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, just thank you so much for that introduction. So for those that are listening that don't know, I am a first generation Bengali. So bringing in that other voice and other lens here. And that, I think we can just jump right into today. Man, I mean, even just as we're about to get started, I know this topic brings up so many emotions for me personally. I don't know about you, but I feel like I am in a much better place for sure to even feel comfortable to be able to talk about this. But I know for many people, this one really hits hard. What about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I think we've all experienced this in some way in our world, especially if you're, a child to immigrant parents. I think that played so much into our identity, and that's something that I definitely felt growing up, that obedience and respect really shaped my identity and how I viewed myself. And it's so interesting when I talk to other people about this, because everyone's kind of in their own journey on this. Some people really feel like they've done the work to unlearn and really recognize how obedience doesn't really equal respect, and how they've had to rewire their relationships with those authority figures, whether that may be parents or siblings, whoever. I don't necessarily think I'm quite there yet to that mastery level, but for sure, I think I'm recognizing, how that's played into my world, and doing more of that inner work and recognizing that there is some boundaries that need to be drawn. This can be really traumatic for some people that didn't really have healthy relationships with their parents or those authority figures in their life, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And just I really appreciate you sharing that. I hope that resonates with people listening, because just the fact that you're still doing the work and you want to be able to show that, right? Like you want to be here talking about this. Like, it's not like you've got it all figured out. I mean, I don't even have it all figured out, but I definitely feel like I'm at a different stage than where you are. And I think that's so important for people to see, that you can be in different places. We hopefully highlight the different stages that you could potentially be at, if that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, think about it, right? Like for anybody, like especially for children, right? I mean, like during our most pivotal moments in our lives where we are really, really molded by our surroundings, it's so tough for a kid to receive such conflicting information of, in order for you to make it in Western culture, you need to act a certain way. And at the same time, you have to stay true to your traditions and values. I feel like that's just so confusing, and we tend to internalize that in a way that really affects us down the road. And I know a lot of people, it takes years to unlearn that. I mean, like you were mentioning, right? Like you're still doing the work. And some people, I feel like, never even unlearn that.
I feel like I can think of so many accounts growing growing up where I heard a lot of adults always tell me and tell my parents, quite honestly, like how they've raised such an obedient girl. You know, she's so
Yeah.
respectful of her elders, or she's, she's always the one that's taking care of all of the cousins and the siblings or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
hearing that was always like a good ego boost to me, right? It was always
Yeah.
like so validating that an adult grown up has seen the world. If they're telling me that I'm doing something and they're recognizing the good in that, that must be a good thing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I always internalized that, and I always thought that if I just, make other people around me happy, if I'm always people pleasing, then I'm good,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that became a very dangerous narrative because growing into adulthood, that still carried with me. And it really forced me to not have a voice of my own, whether
Mm-hmm.
that would be what I want to do with my career, what I wanted to do in school, or just, passions
Yeah.
in itself. Like I didn't know what I was passionate about or what it is that I
Yeah.
wanted. It was always seeking validation from those authority figures and my parents more
Mm-hmm.
specifically because they played such a huge role in my life. And I felt like, I'm sure you can relate to this too, is like children of immigrant parents, like we feel this pressure that we owe them something because
Yeah.
they've, given us this opportunity to come to America and given us a
Mm-hmm.
world that has brought us so many privileges and allow us to have
Yeah.
an amazing education, a life that's so fulfilling and, endless possibilities. But that doesn't look, the American dream doesn't look the way it does to others that it does for us. That was such a weird narrative to grow up with because you went to school and you had all these friends that were like, I want to be an artist or I want to be a painter, like
Yeah.
whatever their
Yeah.
choice of career was. For us, I feel like the narrative always was it's either going to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, like this.
Yeah.
So those stable career choices. So it was definitely a battle growing up because you had those very traditional thoughts and ideas at
Mm-hmm.
home and the complete opposite sometimes at school where you're just trying to fit
Yeah.
in and you don't.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like what you highlighted just now, I think is so important and it deserves its own episode in talking about how first generation kids of immigrants aren't necessarily given the space to explore creative options
Yeah.
outside of what like is traditionally seen as successful. It's so funny hearing you talk about this because a memory of mine comes to light of when I felt that confusion of
Mm-hmm.
adhering to what my parents thought was success and then thinking I was going to get that validation and that acceptance and then not. It was pretty pivotal for me where I started to really uncouple obedience and respect was in high school my senior year when I finally made straight A's. And instead of what I thought was going to be like a huge parade and like, all these celebrations and such excitement from my mom, it was almost the complete opposite. And it felt so flat. She basically just like shrugged and was like, okay, cool. Whereas like you see this kid, kid. I mean, let's be honest, right? Like 17, yeah,
Yeah.
you're still very young, right? That's when I was just like, what the heck? Like this is so confusing. Like you keep toting all
Yeah.
these things, right? And I'm trying to fulfill that. And then here you are just basically crumbling my world in many ways of like what I thought obedience and respect or what I thought respect was, I guess. That's when I, for me personally, started to uncouple the two.
Mm-hmm.
And start move towards reevaluating what I was doing.
I know that feeling so well, and I think I've definitely gone through that in my own world with my parents
Mm-hmm.
too. And the expectation is to just keep your blinders on and do your best
Yeah.
in school, like everything else comes secondary. And for me, that
Yeah.
moment came in college. Like very similarly, my dad wanted me to go be a doctor, and I was like, yeah, for sure, if that's what my dad wants, that's what I want. And, did the whole pre-med route, took all the classes, volunteered a whole bunch, like really tried to amp up my resume. And then the final step was just taking that MCAT, and man, that was brutal. And just getting myself to study for it. And I was so uninterested. I hated taking those classes. I hated the whole thing, but did it anyway. And the day I got my MCAT score, I think was one of the most heartbreaking days for me, but also one of the most transformative days for me in some way because there was such a dichotomy there. I felt so embarrassed as if like I had failed my dad. But on the flip side, I also felt so relieved that I didn't have to kind of live up to his expectations. Now I could kind of just do whatever I wanted. There was just endless possibilities for me. So it was such a weird kind of a feeling. And in that moment, for sure, like I felt like I had, you know, disobeyed my dad. I failed him and his expectations and his dreams of me. But I think that's where I kind of recognized that this whole time because I had so much respect for him, I just wanted to make sure that I did everything that I could to live up to that.
Yeah.
I think that's when I really learned to recognize what I wanted. And that's when the journey of kind of self-realization started for me. And I think we all have those moments that we can be like, aha, that's kind of where it began for me.
Something that immediately comes to mind, just hearing you talk about you using the term of you. Did you really though? You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's important to highlight too. So, I mean, here we are still like self-deprecating and still like telling ourselves that we're not good enough. And that is still tied to this concept of obedience is not equal respect. Like, no, like it's so toxic. And I just want you to know that you did not fail your parents. If anything, it highlighted to you, like, this was not the right thing for you to do. I'd like to think you're in a much healthier place now because of that.
For sure. And that's what I mean with in our own journeys of where we are with these things, because for the longest time, I used the word failure to describe that moment, you know, because that's how it was ingrained in me. That's how deeply it was ingrained in me, that my respect for my parents meant I had to do everything I possibly could to make sure they were happy. And anything other than that was me failing them. And that was a lot to live with. That was very heavy. And the days and weeks that followed, we had some very, very difficult conversations. And I was so grateful to have the support of my brother at the time, who like really fought for me actually. And I was really glad to have him as like my champion, because I don't think I had the necessary tools and the emotional awareness to really recognize that wrong was being done to me. You know, that I just didn't have that vocabulary to really fight for myself. So that came in time, but immediate reaction was just failure. And I recognize that now, that I did not fail them, but it was a win for me, but it took a long time to get there.
I'm so glad you had your brother to lean on. And that, I think that's something that's so crucial of what you said about this, how we unlearn this, right? Like, we don't feel like we have the tools. We don't feel like we have the vocabulary, and we kind of stumble along the way to grow that little voice inside of us, right? Like, it exists. It's there. It's just growing up. Generalization, but growing up, it's like, we've always been told to suppress it. We've always been told to just sit quietly and, you know, politely, and that'll be okay. Like, don't ruffle any feathers. Like, just listen to what your parents say, or, you know, whoever, because they have the best intentions. And I'm so glad to see where you are today. A woman that was figuring it out and realizing, like, shit, like, what do I do now? Like, this is what I thought my life was going to be.
What was that like for you to come to that point? But also, did you have a support system that like fought for you, or did you have to be your own support system and figure that out on your own? Because that's a lot of pressure to put on oneself.
Yeah. Wow, I did not think I would get emotional. I'm gonna need a moment. Okay. Now that I've collected myself somewhat. Yeah, no. I didn't have anybody. I really wanted somebody, and no one was there. The people I tried to reach out to just fed into that whole piece of, you need to do things a certain way, or what you're doing is wrong. Like, you know, it was just a lot of negativity. And at the end of the day, I just wanted someone to just tell me it was going to be okay.
I think that really speaks a lot to the woman that you are now, because you've had to rely on yourself and become so strong along the process that it just speaks to your character, honestly. And it's commendable that you got yourself through all of that. And it's not easy in any way. And I know you know that. I know that. So I'm just very proud of you for being so vulnerable and even, you know, sharing that. And I'm here to say that you made it through a very, very difficult period. And, you know, we're still all going through that, and trauma acts in such different ways for all of us, and it's going to come up again and again. We're in such a healthy space now, and you have people around you that are here to support you, and so just really proud of you.
His life. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, 100%. I would not be here today if it wasn't for my village that I eventually found. And I'm just so thankful for them. It's interesting, right? Because I've worked through it to a place where I can keep moving forward, but it's still something that very much still hurts me to know that all I wanted was love and support. And just feeling like I couldn't get that from the people that that mattered the most to me at that time. And I mean, I clearly that shit still hurts. And honestly, that is why I am doing this. I want others to maybe just experience things a little bit differently and not experience it the way that I did.
I 100% agree that sometimes we have to create our own villages and rely on people that want the best for you, not what we've been told as, you know, our parents or our relatives or family members being those people. Sometimes it's not. It really takes a special kind of recognition to know and see that sometimes it's just healthier to create those boundaries between those people and rely on the friends that have been there for you and they see you as who you are versus what, you know, they expect you to do or expect you to be. We owe that to ourselves because we don't owe anybody anything, whether, you know, however we've been taught. I think we have to unlearn that for sure and uncouple the fact that obedience equals respect. It does not. We don't owe anybody anything. We owe ourselves to be healthy, fulfilled human beings. And at the end of the day, I hope that that kind of comes across to the listeners is we can't be anything but happy in this world. And if people, authority figures in your life, are making you feel that by having lived up to their expectations makes you valued in their eyes, then I would really urge you all to kind of reconsider that. There's an experiment that I've kind of learned to do on my own that really makes it kind of clear as to who I'm doing it for. So like, for example, if we're invited to a dinner, do I want to go to that dinner because someone wants me to go, or is it because I want to go? So I have to ask these questions like, why am I going? Am I going to get happiness from this? Or is it just so X, Y, and Z person can be happy? Or, you know, there's an ulterior motive here behind this. In practicing that, it really has helped me kind of realize who I'm doing this for, and that makes me prioritize myself.
So I think what you shared 100%, that is so key in figuring out, as you're starting to unlearn and uncouple obedience and where are those moments where you can start making little changes, little tweaks to how you receive a situation or interact with a situation, I think is so important. And I also just want to say thank you for asking that question that you did. It clearly opened up some sort of vault that I'd created for myself.
Yeah. And there's things, I mean, it's a heavy topic and it's a heavy thing to reflect on, right? There's just years and years worth of memories that come to light when we talk about this. And for a lot of people, it's traumatic memories. For a lot of people, that's memories they haven't even worked through yet. And, you know, you're not alone. A lot of us are going through this. And I'll be honest, like I'm still working through this. My journey, I feel like just begun quite recently, and I don't even know if I've significant progress to a point where I can be like, okay, I'm good. You know, I've released my trauma. I'm not there. I'm nowhere near that. So it's okay for anyone who's listening to feel like they're kind of in a pit right now and to have these moments of, wow, I didn't know I needed that, or, you know, asking yourself really difficult questions. That's okay. That's the journey that we all have to go on. And it's not going to be easy, but as long as you're doing the work, I think that's what matters the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing for me that has helped immensely is going through therapy. That is something that I'm so thankful. I put my ego aside. I accepted that I needed the help and that I was willing to go to somebody for the help. Growing up, even to this day, this is a battle that I'm still having and still trying to advocate for and change mindsets or just, you know, open conversations, is this idea of mental wellness. That is actually another topic I'm going to focus on solely. So is that something that helped me immensely with, as I was stumbling through this, as I was uncoupling obedience and respect, is that talking to somebody who understood unbiased what was happening and helping me put that language to what I was feeling, right? Finding the words for what was going on in my life and really sharing with me what I was going through in a way that I couldn't see. Like you had mentioned, I mean, having these conversations, like, you are part of my village, and this is a real-time example of how this shit works. And I'm just so thankful for you.
I'm thankful for you too, friend.
Oh, yeah. These things are so necessary and they're so layered. And I have put a lot of freaking work into this. And I do truly feel like I'm in an amazing place. And like you said, there's still a lot of trauma that is there. And to be honest, does trauma ever really go away?
I think you just find ways to work through them and mask them a little bit better, but they're still traumas at the end of the day.
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh. For sure.
Yeah, there's going to be triggers and things years and years down the road are going to come back to you. And I hope it hurts a little less then because, you know, had enough lived experience, talk to other people about it. Therapy, best thing, best thing, I think. And I feel like people like South Asian millennials, especially right now, need so much therapy. And just because we just didn't have the tools like to process it and talk about it, because who would we have talked to? I think having this village and just this space in itself to talk through these things, I think has been so immensely helpful. And I really just hope that it sparks conversations with those around us, whether or not they may be dealing with the same thing or not, but just human to human interaction around topics that really relate to all of us, I think is such a good way to just begin and heal together. So I really hope that listeners can take that away from this as well. We recognize that the intentions of our authority figures have always been, there's a point which we grow up and recognize that we have to fight for ourselves as well. And we do have to have that shift where we're constantly, in respecting our parents, fulfilling their goals and dreams and aspirations. And really, we have to look at ourselves and what makes us happy, because that's what's going to make them happy. You know, our parents always say, like, that was never communicated, and that gets lost in translation. So we have to make that translation correct. And we have to be the ones to start the change. So it's a lot of work. And I really do think that therapy is a really great place to start.
For sure. And I mean, it's also a constant learning and unlearning, you know, especially because we might experience something and think we had it all together and then realize like, okay, cool. Maybe there's something else that I need to redirect myself for. And I hope listeners take away as well is that, it's just a constant unlearning and learning experience. It's a journey. It's going to have highs and lows, and that's just part of life, right? Like I'd like to think we don't want to just flatline. Like we want to have some really great moments, and part of life is having those low moments too, right? Like I'd like to think that we're able to come out better on the other side of it. I can attest to that, and I can be an example of that because I wouldn't be here doing this podcast if I wasn't there. And recognizing that this was going to be a journey, this was going to be an experience for all of us.
Definitely.
What a time. All right. So I guess that's a good place for us to stop. I feel like we've talked about a lot of really great things. This turned into a mini support session.
It felt like a therapy session for us both.
Yeah. And I think in the first episode, I talked about like, I'm excited to see what comes of these episodes and what I'm learning along the way with everyone that I talk with. And I think thank you again for being here. Just really, really appreciate it. Always have such wonderful conversations with you. And I'm just so, so thankful for our friendship and just that we're in each other's lives.
I appreciate you too, friend. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and allowing me to be vulnerable here with you. As you mentioned, you know, you and I have always had such amazing conversations, and it's been awesome to bring it to this podcast and allow others kind of have a perspective into, you know, the things that you and I talk about. So it was awesome, and it was definitely heavy, but also very necessary, I think. And I think that's the whole point, right? Is to just have these human to human interactions and conversations that help us all kind of heal and just keep moving forward. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that is what we call this, right? The What is Life podcast, where we're trying to make the uncomfortable comfortable.
Yeah.
And I hope that those listening, it just helps maybe reassure some doubts that you may be having, and shows that, you know, we both, like myself and Namrata, we're both in different parts of our journey, and we're constantly learning and unlearning. That's just part of it. Alrighty. Well, would you like to share if people are interested in reaching out to you, how they can? Yeah, as we just close out today.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Namu701. That's NAMU 701. And if you're also interested, please just send me a message and I'm happy to connect through text, email, whatever works for you. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here today.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, everyone. Have a good one.